Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure to welcome His Excellency Emmanuel Lenain for this special event that we are hosting, reflecting on France's vision of the Indo-Pacific. As we all know, Indo-Pacific, both as a conceptual argument as well as a policy relevant understanding of the region, has taken on a new dimension in recent times. And different countries have come up with their own understandings, with their own policy documents on the Indo-Pacific. And given the centrality of the question to the unique equations that are developing in the world at the moment, on behalf of ORF, let me welcome you all to this very special event today, where His Excellency has very kindly agreed to elaborate on some of the thinking behind how France views the region, what are some of its stakes, and how it wants to engage the regional partners. And we have two very distinguished panelists to discuss and elaborate and comment on some of the things that the ambassador might want to articulate on. We have Dr. Mohan Kumar, former ambassador of India to France, and presently chairperson, Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries, RIS. And we have with us Ms. Indrani, Bagchi, diplomatic editor, Times of India, both of whom will be commenting after His Excellency's remarks. So, His Excellency, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Arsh, and it's a pleasure to be invited by ORF. It's a pleasure to meet Ambassador Kumar, also a good friend and always genuine and stimulating when engaging into discussions. So. I'm very happy to see both of you today on this panel. Just a few words and about the so-called Indo-Pacific strategy. And first of all, let me say once again why this is so important to my country. Reason is obvious. It's geography. And geography doesn't lie. I mean, we feel that we are India's neighbor. We feel that we are also a country of the Pacific. I mean, we have a population in the Pacific. I mean, compared to India's population, it seems pretty small. But 1.5 million, which is important to my country, citizens living in that region. Also, and as we see that these days the oceans, maritime power takes a considerable part in our geostrategic thinking. I mean, for us, this region is key. 90%, 93% of our exclusive economic zone is located in the region. And that provides us with the second largest exclusive economic zone, just next to the US. And finally, we have also troops in the region, troops to protect our communities. We have roughly 5,000 troops pre-positioned in the region, plus roughly 2,000 on two big bases in Djibouti and Abu Dhabi to enforce our values and our partnerships, and especially, but I will come back to that, freedom of navigation, which is key to us. So, country of origin, and second, I mean, we know that the Indo-Pacific in the coming years, more and more, will be a major and maybe the major center of gravity of the world, and that's wouldn't say the battleground, but that's going to be the place where much of the fight for values, and where the world will have to find a proper balance. So that's important that we are there, and that we jointly uphold our values. And obviously, there's also some interest and consequences on our prosperity. I mean, and our maritime trade routes are important. And we've seen during the pandemic, actually, with the increase of sea traffic, how important is it? Well, the region is really a crossroad. I mean, you know the importance of the route linking Europe and the Persian Gulf to the Pacific, and we can't afford to have them at risk at any point. I mean, more broadly, and I'm not going to expand on that, but you know that this region is key for our efforts for common goods, to fight against climate change, for obviously for health, to protect biodiversity, and all the common goods. So no doubt this is key to us. What we want to achieve, very briefly, because you may have seen our strategy. I mean, President Macron has made speeches repeatedly about that. Just from the same year as did Prime Minister Modi. That started in 2018 when Prime Minister Modi did his speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue. President Macron did a speech in Australia, in a place called Garden Island. Basically, what we want to achieve: one, security. I just spoke about the securing the main shipping routes, but security is also obviously fight against terrorism. It's financing, radicalization, organized crime, and so on and so forth. Two, we want to boost regional cooperation to enforce this value and this interest, and obviously we're thrilled that India was able to join a regional organization, and we value our cooperation in the Indian Ocean Rim Association, in the Indian Ocean Community, in the Pacific Community, in the Pacific Islands Forum, and obviously with the ASEAN. And I know that India as always keeps on engaging very strongly with this organization, especially with ASEAN. So it's very important. And number three, what we want to achieve, and I already said it, it's through common goods. And I mentioned environment, biodiversity, health, but there's also education, digital technology. And in that respect, as in the others, the EU will be key. And I will come back to that. That's very, very, very important. I mean, we promote, I would say, the same strategy with India. We don't want a purely military approach, which would increase tensions, and it's not France who says that. I mean, it's countries in the region. Listen to Indonesia. My minister was there recently. Listen to Malaysia. Listen to many countries. I mean, we feel that obviously, given the rise of certain powers in the region, the massive upheavals, they are a threat. They are a threat from the order. They are a threat to stability. They are a threat from the freedom we enjoy. But we feel that the best way to address that is through a global strategy, an inclusive one, not excluding anybody, and also not purely military, not purely confrontational, but a positive one, providing alternative. I mean, providing possibilities for countries if they don't want to take such and such financing, they don't want to adopt such and such model. They know that they will be provided with a possibility to develop, but with in a sustainable, transparent, green manner. And that's very important, and that's what we're working on. We're working with our EU partners. I mean, you've seen this strategy. You've seen also that's related that last week the EU has unveiled what's called Global Gateway, and it's a huge initiative of 300 billion euros, and which will finance connectivity infrastructures to create new partnership and limit the dependencies I just mentioned. So this is very important. This is going to be at the core of the French presidency starting 1st of January for 6 months. I mean, we feel that we should make progress now to implement the EU strategy. And one very important step will be the conference, the forum we organized in Paris on 22nd of February. And we sincerely hope at ministerial level that Minister Jaishankar will attend, and he will be obviously given the core role of India in the Indo-Pacific region. It would be given a really keynote and a major role in that conference. That being said, I don't know if I have still some time left. In that case, I could develop in more details the content of the strategy, or I can wait for questions. Just up to you. Tell me.
Sir, you can take a few more minutes and then we can go to the discussions.
Well, so the pillar of that strategy, I mean, number one, obviously, maritime security. As you know, since 2016, we have Navy ships going through the region to patrol, to enforce the freedom of navigation. Not many countries can afford that, and we are very proud, and we feel it's a commitment we should and we will maintain. Second, we feel that there's a lot to be done to improve connectivity in the region, and that's what we are going to do with the EU and with this strategy. You have infrastructures to be built, you have technologies to be shared. It is very important that we provide also this opportunity. Then common goods, as said, I mean, we're going to provide a concrete and positive addition. One key framework to do so will be, once again, the International Solar Alliance. As you know, our two countries, and we co-chair this beautiful organization that we launched in 2015. It's really thriving these days. I mean, the membership has expanded to 100 members, which is quite an achievement for any international organization at that age. And now we're entering the years when it can deliver concrete results on the ground in the Indo-Pacific region. And I'm sure you will be amazed in the coming months by what's going to be announced. I think that's about what I wanted to say to start with.
Thank you, His Excellency. I think that was a detailed exposition on some of the things, some of the priorities that France has set out for itself. Let me now go over to our discussants. Ambassador Kumar, if you'll go first, and then I'll come to Indrani.
Thank you very much, Harsh, and it's lovely to be with the French ambassador based in Delhi, Ambassador Emmanuel, Lenain, and equally, hello Indrani, and it's good to see you as well. So let me begin by saying that I think the interests, which are really abiding interests of France, have been spelled out by Ambassador Lenain. What I want to do is try and delineate a very striking convergence between India and France in this regard, in the area particularly of the Indian Ocean, because the theater, the Indo-Pacific theater, actually comprises two sub-theaters, that is the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. I must tell you honestly that I believe enough countries are invested in the Pacific, mainly because of China, but also because of what is happening in South China Sea, East China Sea, etc. So it is the Indian Ocean where I believe that it's a bit light. And that is where, to my mind, France is like no other power. And I know it sounds like a cliche to say it's a resident power, but look at it this way. France sees itself as an inclusive, stabilizing, and balancing power. France does not see itself as a combative kind of power. They think that it can be useful in the Indian Ocean theater, but also largely in the Indo-Pacific theater, to have an inclusive, stabilizing, and balancing power. Secondly, France has an almost non-negotiable commitment to multilateralism. It's almost non-negotiable. In all their policy papers, white papers, you will find that for France, it is not something which is negotiable. So that is, again, leads them to believe that a multipolar world is a much better place to be in. And again, I see a strong convergence between India's worldview and France's worldview. And this is useful, and I'll come to China a little bit later when we talk of a multipolar Indo-Pacific, if you like. Finally, I think what we are all trying to do, at least from an Indian perspective, is what I choose to call hedging minilaterals. I think what India is doing in the Indo-Pacific area is a series of hedging minilaterals, and where I think we are combining with different countries in different sub-theaters of the Indo-Pacific. I draw attention to the fact that we do have something with France, India, Australia. It's a bit in suspended animation, but I have no doubt that eventually it will take off. And then we've got, of course, resilient supply chains as well with India, Australia, Japan. So in the Indo-Pacific theater, you will find that India has a number of minilaterals which are hedging minilaterals. So what do I hope to achieve with a Franco-Indian partnership in the Indian Ocean? Firstly, I think their definition of Indo-Pacific tallies with ours. Theirs is Djibouti to Polynesia. It's simple. Whereas the American one is Hollywood to Bollywood. Djibouti to Polynesia suits us much better because we have vital interests in the eastern shores of Africa and the Gulf and so on. Now, France is the only country, to my mind, which has a military presence, some kind of military presence. And as the ambassador mentioned, definitely UAE, Djibouti, but also Reunion, Mayotte, Polynesia. So this really covers a very vast spectrum of the Indian Ocean, if you like. So the geographical spread in which France has some kind of military presence, which can be augmented as need be, is quite phenomenal. So what do I hope to achieve with France? When I was ambassador between 2015 and 17, in 2016, we launched the first maritime dialogue with France. That was the first time ever when France and India said, let's have a dialogue exclusively on things which are connected to the maritime sphere. Since then, I believe there have been 2 other dialogues. What I do hope to achieve, Harshan, I want to be specific. First, I think the ambassador mentioned freedom of navigation. 80% of goods which go to the EU have to transit Indian Ocean. So there is no question. The EU probably has a much bigger stake in freedom of navigation than India, to be honest. Although it's our ocean and we call it Indian Ocean. You have EU, which is the major trading entity of the world today, even bigger than United States. If you just combine all the EU countries, 80% of their trade will come to a standstill if something happens to the sea lanes of communication in Indian Ocean. And I don't think they would like it. I don't think we would like it. I don't think anybody will like it, frankly, except maybe very few. So I think the freedom of navigation becomes absolutely central. Second, anti-piracy. And so I introduced the concept of maritime security. It is linked to the unimpeded flow of trade, if you like. 80% of trade also happens on sea. It doesn't happen through air or doesn't happen on land borders. So we need a certain element of maritime security, which could be terrorism, which could be piracy, which could be disasters, man-made disasters, natural disasters, and these have to be tackled. So I again believe that France and India can work together, France certainly will pull its weight. By the way, EU has come up with its own policy on Indo-Pacific. Netherlands and Germany have also come up with their own position papers on Indo-Pacific. But I would like to tell your audience that France was not just the first country to come out with an Indo-Pacific. I also see the security part of it has to be borne by France. With due respect to other EU countries can do, for example, Netherlands fancies itself as being the country which will drive EU policy in the cyber area, for example. Netherlands feels that that is an area where they have strengths. Germany has focused extremely on connectivity. So has France, but Germany, it's obvious, has also trade interests in Indo-Pacific. So if you really come down to brass tacks and you want to provide security, you have to look at France, and you cannot look any further in the EU, frankly. And that is just the way it is. And so for me, the strategic and the security aspect of Indo-Pacific will always be driven by France, not by other. I'm not trying to belittle the role of other EU countries, but for me, it is France which will drive this EU policy on Indo-Pacific. Climate change and sustainable development is something the ambassador mentioned. I do believe in the Indo-Pacific area, we haven't paid as much attention as we should, and I think it's important. But for me, ultimately, the question that we have to, and this is a difficult question, so I'm going to talk of wrinkles, if you like, with the permission of the ambassador. One is, the China is the elephant in the room, and I accept the fact that France doesn't want to be seen as combative. That's why it talks of an inclusive. By the way, we also talk of inclusive. I mean, Prime Minister Modi's speech also talks of inclusive. So I think what we have to be clear is counterintelligence and counterterrorism. We need information on Indian Ocean. And France, I believe, is supremely placed to gather information in this regard. It's wonderful news that France has posted a naval liaison officer at the Fusion Center Indian Ocean region at Gurgaon. Seychelles has also done it, but I think France was one of the earliest countries to do it. We need valuable intelligence on what is happening in Indian Ocean. My colleagues in the military tell me that up until 2008, 2010, there was no Chinese presence at all in the Indian Ocean. Today, you have semi-permanent presence. So while not being combative, and I understand where France is coming from, I think we still need to understand what people are doing in the theater, in the Indian Ocean theater. That is vital for India. We simply don't have the resources yet, frankly. And that is my personal view. So we need the help of France. And I believe France will also be better served because of the profound interests they have in Indian Ocean. So that brings me to two wrinkles, if you like, in the whole issue. One is obviously China. And it should be obvious to everyone that EU and France want to engage China and not confront China. That is their policy. And I think that must be respected. India's policy is to both confront China in Ladakh and engage with China elsewhere. That's what we are doing. We are participating in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We talk to them about things, and we are also confronting them, if that is the word I want, you can call it what you like, in Ladakh. So we have a slightly different perspective on China. I do not believe this is an unbridgeable difference when it comes to Indian Ocean, because EU and China are also aware of the threats that China poses. When I say threat, I don't mean a military threat. It could be threats of different kinds. Second, I think, is the AUKUS. It has obviously caused a wrinkle. I made a passing reference to it, but hopefully in the long run, we will go back. That is Australia, India, France, to doing what we want to do in the Indo-Pacific. Last point is on ASEAN centrality, which all of us have repeated like a mantra in all our papers. The fact of the matter is, hedging minilaterals are multiplying. By definition, this will have an impact on ASEAN centrality. So you will have to find a way to make sure that ASEAN remains where they are, but there are other things which are moving very rapidly. ASEAN, by definition, cannot move as rapidly as the Quad or as a trilateral mechanism or even the resilient supply chain that India has got. They cannot, because that's not how they are structured. So somehow countries like France, I think, have an important role, but also India, to kind of talk to ASEAN and take them along, because the fact of the matter is the ASEAN centrality will diminish over time. As you have more and more hedging minilaterals, as I call it, you will find that the Indo-Pacific becomes a very crowded strategic space. There is just too many actors involved. And so that, by definition, will mean ASEAN will not be the only game in town. So we will have to find a way. I don't think ASEAN is unaware of this. I think ASEAN is acutely aware of this, which is why they, for example, I think it was Singapore or some other country, while welcoming AUKUS, said that we hope it is complementary and compatible to regional structures. What they mean is ASEAN, of course. So these, to me, are really the issues involved. I see massive potential for France and India, subject to only one thing. From our side, I do strongly believe we have to invest much more in Navy. Even now it gets only 12% of the Indian defense budget, which is really insignificant. So we will have to, augment exponentially our assets in the Navy and try to link up with France. It also gives us options, frankly, because Quad has a particular role. And with the advent of AUKUS, Quad role has been clarified much more, to my mind. I don't think we should expect a purely military role. In fact, I've said elsewhere that I wish the quadrilateral was called Quadrilateral Strategic Dialogue and not Security Dialogue. Now that security is more or less being, everything is security at the end of the day, but it's not security or military. So quadrilateral could be called a quadrilateral strategic dialogue, because everything the Quad does is strategic at the end of the day. But what I'm trying to say is, if India can ride two horses, one Quad focused heavily in the Pacific, but also in the Indian Ocean, but a Franco-Indian hub for the Indian Ocean, especially since Indian origin people are there in Reunion Islands as well. Of course, they're all French citizens, I must clarify. But can we have a Franco-Indian hub for Indian Ocean, in which we can rope in countries like Mauritius, Seychelles, etc., which are all part of the Indian Ocean Commission anyway, or the IORA, for example, where France is now playing a role. So I think we need to find a way by which France and India can lead this effort in the Indian Ocean, again, to make sure that different groupings are not working at cross purposes. That's all. I don't think we should do too much of coordination. Each of these has a purpose. Just make sure they are not working at cross purposes. I'd like to thank you, Harsh, for the initial remarks, and then I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kumar. And I think some of the issues, some of the wrinkles that you have raised, it would be interesting to hear Ambassador Lenain's response to them. I think the issue of hedging minilaterals, the issue of around China and where is the debate going on that, as well as I think the larger issue of European coordination, different European countries trying to do different things, and where does France look at its own role situated within that matrix. So, Ambassador, I'll come to you after Indrani. In the end, Indrani, if you can go forth now, and then finally I'll give the floor to the Ambassador.
Yes, thank you, Harsh, and thank you, Ambassador, for that exposition on France's Indo-Pacific strategy. I have a couple of comments, but I have many more questions, which is just the nature of my job. First, my question would be: how does the French Indo-Pacific strategy align with or coordinate with the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy? And that is something, or even the Dutch Indo-Pacific strategy, and that I think is something that you might want to address for us. Second, I wanted to say that I agree with Ambassador Mohan Kumar about the predominance of the Indian Ocean in India-France concord on the Indo-Pacific, and I think it would make a lot more sense for us to concentrate on the Indian Ocean, in the Indian Ocean area, from Madagascar to Mauritius and Seychelles to even to Djibouti and the Horn of Africa. I think we are uniquely positioned to coordinate our approaches to not just in the military realm, but in the economic realm, and that would include things like fishing. I mean, I look at the IUUs, the unregulated fishing in the seas, which is depleting fishing stocks in the Indian Ocean region, certainly in Bay of Bengal and in the South China Sea region. But I think we could do a preemptive sort of work around economic issues in the Indian Ocean region. And second would be on the politics and in preserving democratic principles. We watched with a little bit of concern in the Madagascar elections last year, where we saw foreign mercenary groups taking positions, taking up roles in these regions. I do believe that both France and India, with their strong democratic credentials, have a responsibility to ensure that countries like Madagascar and Mauritius and Seychelles find democratic political alternatives when it comes to elections, when it comes to political transition. And I believe that is important because the lack of such attention opens up spaces for, as we saw the Wagner Group in Madagascar, but also to powers that export a less democratic way of life. And I think that may be important for the security of the region going forward. France has a naval base in Abu Dhabi. India has very close relations with Abu Dhabi, and we've just started the West Quad between Israel, UAE, India, and the US, and we might sort of explore the possibility of France, India, the UAE working together in maritime security, in defense, in preserving the slots in that area, very important area between the Horn of Africa and the Gulf of Aden. So I was wondering if you had some thoughts on this matter. The last issue would be on AUKUS. And yes, it is, I think France was justified in taking the kind of response that it did. The condition of global politics being what it is, I presume, and the great power that France is, I presume we will get beyond this sooner or later. And I was wondering if you had thoughts about France and Indian technology, or in the area of greater maritime security in this region. I will stop here for now. Thank you, Harsh.
Thank you, Indrani, and thanks to our two discussants for their wonderful issues that they've raised. I think Ambassador has a full plate of issues for now. I'll also invite my audience to send us their questions, comments, and observations, which we can put up both to the Ambassador as well as to our discussants. But Ambassador, if you would like to address some of the questions that Ambassador Kumar and Indrani have raised.
Thank you very much. I will start by the question by Ambassador Kumar. I must say that he's been an outstanding ambassador for India in Paris, and very, very fondly remembered and admired. But I think he would have been also a very good French ambassador, and not only because of his mastery of my language. I mean, he's been brilliant in his comments, and I fully agree with all what's been said. The idea of building an Indo-French hub for countries in the region is really an important one. And if we go more into the specific, I think given the link, the connections both our countries enjoy with the for example, with the EAU, it's very important that we connect with these sort of countries in our strategy. I might have only one slight differences. It's when you mentioned that there might be some slight differences between India and France on our approach to China, and that we might be, I mean, if I understood properly, or I wouldn't say appeasing, but more conciliatory. Honestly, I don't think so. I think we have quite a robust approach, but it's we recognize the multiplicity of the challenge by China. I mean it's been a matter of discussion within the EU with our partners. I mean, we all agree that years ago that we had to stop being naive, that China was not delivering on its promise to first to be responsible stakeholders. I mean, for business and trade. I mean, the condition when access to WTO was granted in 2001 was that it bid a level playing field with other countries. I mean, it's obvious by now that it's not the case. I mean that there are all sorts of dumping, IPR threat, and others. And the second assumption was that on the security side, that China would have a peaceful rise, which is not the case. I mean, we've seen it in the South China Sea. Then India has suffered it on its border with Ladakh, and we have a few instances. So that being said, we recognize the complexity of the challenge, which means it can be obviously a partner sometime. I mean, see for the fight against climate change, for example. I mean, we'll get nowhere if we don't have countries like China on board. I mean, given the size of its economy, the importance of its emissions, it's obvious. But then in the meantime, it can be a partner, but it can be also a competitor. I mean, for business, it's obvious. We would like it to be a fair competitor, which is not right now. It's a competitor, and and we can't just skip that country. It's an important economic power. It's the second largest. It's according to certain calculations, it's not too far from being the first. It's a competitor, and we have to make everything it takes to have reciprocity and to have a fair competitor. But number three, in the meantime, and this applies more to geostrategic, I mean, it's a rival. It's a rival. We see it, and we said it. and then we have to be strong. We have to defend our values. So I don't think India is really on a different page, honestly. I mean, they are very extensive and very confident discussions at all levels between our armies, navies, air force, NSAs, ministers, prime minister, and president. And I think we recognize this complexity. And basically, beyond that, I think that a country like India is very much apt at bringing together these elements and building more, would I say, the word that is being used often in India, a holistic approach. And so I really think we're on the same page. On Quad, you mentioned Quad. Our position is pretty simple. We are very pragmatic. I mean, France, the EU, we can work with the Quad on a case by case basis. When it brings something extra, when it matches our interests. I mean, we don't want to join things and be aligned. It's not our spirit. But if it's something positive and it brings an added value, let's go for it. And actually, we've done it in the past. We've done it this year. We had the navies from the Quad. They joined a navy exercise that we led. Was called La Pérouse in the month of April in the Bay of Bengal, and it was quite successful. Let me say a few words about to try to answer the questions by Miss Bagchi. It's Indo-Pacific strategy. How do we coordinate with the EU, with Germany and Netherlands? Very well. We really, one of our main goals since we launched our own Indo-Pacific strategy in 2018 is to be joined by other EU members. We wanted to raise awareness. And we feel that we're never as strong as when we are united. And the EU, as you know, is a big engine. I mean, Ambassador Kumar was very nice to recall that the EU is the first trade power worldwide, but it's also a hub for innovation and for many things. And which means we encourage other partners to develop their strategy. Obviously, the German, we are very close with Germany, but also the Netherlands, and then the EU. And the EU strategy is always the same story with the EU. You will see, if you have time to go through the strategy, it's a very, very comprehensive work, which is going to yield huge results in the coming years. I mean, we are not trying to make big announcements to impress everybody, but it's serious work and it's backed by huge resources. I mentioned the Gateway Initiative. It's 300 billion euros of credit behind that. It's going to be massive. How can we help countries such as Madagascar to get some positive alternative, democratic alternative? It's key, and we really are teaming up with India. We recognize the role of India in the region at large. I mean, and in Eastern Africa, obviously. You're the largest democracy worldwide. You also have a huge diaspora, especially in East Africa. I remember figures of 25 million of Indians living abroad. Some lead big companies in the Silicon Valley, but a lot of them are active and very positive also in East Africa and other places. And we can build using these resources and build strategy. One of the goals right now of our two governments is to be able to launch joint development project, joint financing project in the Indo-Pacific region to be able to provide, as you said, alternative model. I think otherwise you mentioned developing a cooperation with Abu Dhabi. Yes, priority and given the connection India enjoys with the country, and given the very high strategic confidence we have this country with our military base, with the strategic partnership we also develop, I think you will see a lot of things coming in the coming months. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador, there are some questions from the audience which I would, I would read them out for you. I think one of the questions is about this rules-based maritime order. This is a concept that has been talked about a lot. And here we have Manoj, who wants you to perhaps elaborate on what it means for France when you say rules-based maritime order. What exactly are the ramifications? Whether there are any institutional mechanisms that you feel are necessary for that rules-based orders imposition in the region. Then there is a question on France's plans, if there are any, for a robust India presence in the Indian Ocean. So this is by Captain Agnihotri from National Maritime Foundation. So he's looking at this idea of perhaps for a viable balance to China's near certain permanent presence in the Western Indian Ocean. So is there, I think Ambassador Kumar also raised this point of what possibly India and France can do together. But his is primarily as to if France is thinking along those lines and what are the thoughts there. And finally, there is a question which is, I think, from Anushka Saxena. She wants, she's talking about naval capacities that India is trying to develop and what India can learn from French experience. And then she's pointing out the debate that India is currently having, whether India should build a third aircraft carrier and whether or not it should be nuclear powered. So given that France already operates a nuclear powered aircraft carrier, what are the potential opportunities and challenges for Indo-French partnership in that regard, if at all?
Thank you. These are very good questions. What is a rule-based order? Basically, after World War II, our countries decided jointly that we should do everything it takes to avoid a new world war and to have a world as peaceful as possible, and that we should prevent that any country can use force against another. And so we agreed jointly on a set of rules to avoid that, and body for conflict resolution. Some of these bodies, by the way, are and can be reformed. And as you know, my country feels that India should be a permanent member of the Security Council, and we have to adapt to today's world reality and new powers. But doesn't change anything on the substance. We have this law, we have this agreement, and it applies to the law of the sea. As you know, there's a whole set of conventions were adopted in 1982 for the major one, which is called the Montego Bay Convention, and this corpus of texts make it impossible for one country or for one power just to change the status quo by force. And it's very important. If you want to avoid a threat to our common prosperity, our common security, Ambassador Kumar recalled the crucial importance of the region for traffic, for container, for freight traffic. It's very important. So basically, when we say we sustain this rule-based maritime order, it means we defend the freedom which is enshrined in this text freedom to go through that region, freedom to trade without hindrances, freedom to fish, provided that you abide by the economic zones, you respect your territorial waters and so on and so forth. But that is very key, because throughout history we've seen that each time some countries trying to use their newly acquired power to change in brutal manners the word balance, I mean, it was the recipe for disaster. That's what we want to avoid. We think there's an international community, and we should adjust the international order according to the law and through discussions, not through the rapport de force. What can we do to ensure maritime security and what our Navy can do together? They do a lot, actually. They do share some intelligence, some information, some data. I mean, as Mr. Kumar recalled it, we were the first country to send a liaison officer to IFC IORA in Bulgaria, and it's very practical. I mean, he can, and he does, bring a lot of data with him. But we have a lot of channels. We have a very vibrant maritime security dialogue, and also on the sea we do a lot. I mean, we do sometimes some joint patrolling. Our military bases in the region are more and more open to Navy ships or planes from India. For example, we have a base in La Réunion Island, and regularly you have some plane used to for reconnaissance, which are called P8. Which are stationed, we can refuel and in our base, and you will see more and more in that in the coming future. In terms of naval capacity, I've been asked things which are beyond my competence, I guess. Should we go more for submarines or for aircraft carriers? My country is going for both, but choices are very difficult. What I can only state is that whatever the choice India will make, we will be there to provide our best technologies. That's what we've been doing for quite a long time. I mean, we started cooperating on aircraft fighters in the 1950s. At that time, it was called the Tufani, the program, but we've done that since you mentioned the Navy ship. I mean, we've done that repeatedly. I mean, right now the cooperation on Scorpion submarines being built in Mumbai at Mazagon Limited, I mean, is going extremely well with Naval Group. I mean, the fourth submarine was put at sea 2 weeks ago, and the two extra are going to be delivered within 2 years. So it's very positive, and obviously I don't need to mention the cooperation of Rafale, since it's very well known and perfectly also on schedule. That's a matter of immense pride, in spite of COVID, in spite of everything, in spite of the fact that some factories had to be shut for a while when we had our first wave. I mean, they've been working days and nights, extra shift, weekends, and we are on time. 30 aircraft have been delivered to India, and by April next year, the 36 will be delivered. So it's a big success, and hopefully it will be replicated in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency. And since we have few minutes left, I'd like to give the floor back to the discussants if they have any comments or any response to some of the questions that were raised. Ambassador Kumar?
Just a minute. I'll just take a minute, Harsh. Thank you very much for the floor. No, I think what we have here, especially between France and India, but also others, is a commitment to certain principles and values. The principles are keeping the sea lanes of communication open, freedom of navigation. Values are sustainable development, democracy, pluralism, etc. I think the test will come when these are challenged. They have not yet been challenged. What I see happening is an incremental challenge, if you like. I mean, this is something China experts must verify, but somebody was telling me for the first time, China has declared that Northern Indian Ocean is a core interest for China. I speak under correction. I'm being honest. I don't know. But if this is true, then we can expect a tug of war. But I think the real test for countries like France, India, and other countries will come when the principle of freedom of navigation, overflight patrols, or unimpeded movement, sustainable development, when these are challenged overtly, if at all. So we have to be ready for two things. One is an overt challenge, which may or may not happen. The other is a kind of creeping, covert, shall we say, actions which slowly undermine the values and principles which we stand for. So I think we have to be wary of both. Thank you.
Indrani?
The only submission I have is that we need to have probably a more no holds barred conversation on China. We all tend to skirt around the issue because China is a huge economy. It's a superpower, but it is still our biggest challenge. And I think addressing that challenge, or at least detailing the facets of that challenge, should become much more imperative for countries like France and India, especially as we go forward in the Indian Ocean region. Thanks, Harsh. That's really all I say.
Thank you. Thank you to the ambassador for taking time out today and giving us a detailed exposition on France's interests, as well as the opportunities that France is creating for itself and for its partners like India. And as Ambassador Kumar pointed out, there is so much convergence here that it's striking, and the way I think the two nations have approached the idea of the Indo-Pacific and its operationalization is also quite similar. So it would be interesting to see which other dimensions this relationship goes forward along. And thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for taking time out. Thank you, Ambassador Kumar and Indrani, for taking time out for this discussion. We have had an excellent discussion, a very open, I think, honest. Also, Indrani mentioned an honest discussion. It was by far a very open discussion on some of the challenges and the opportunities that are there for France and for India in remapping our approaches to the Indo-Pacific. So thank you once again, and thanks to everyone who joined us today for this very interesting conversation.
Thank you, Ambassador Kumar. Thank you, Ms. Bagchi. Thank you very much.